So I'm Maureen MacArthur-Hart. I'm with Global Genes, and I will be your track host for these afternoon sessions. And as a reminder, we also would like to welcome all those folks joining us through remotely through the Platform Q's live stream. Our first session this afternoon will walk us through the effective use of wearable devices for gathering data for research and clinical care. So please join me in welcoming Don Jones, who is the Chief Digital Officer at the Scripps Translational Science Institute, as well as Chairman of the Cardiff Ocean Group.
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to take you on a very fast tour of what I refer to as digital health, or sometimes connected health, or sometimes digital medicine, and there's several other terms. And I'm going to do so by talking about not only what we're doing at the Scripps Translational Science Institute, but what's actually happening around the world, because I only spend about a third of my time with Scripps. The other two-thirds of my time I spend with the world's pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and consumer products companies, and you're going to see plenty of evidence of that as I go through this. So, what we do at Scripps, what we do at this particular research institute at Scripps is a small research institute. It's 35 people, about to become 70, and I'll explain that in just a minute. We train physicians as clinical researchers and give award a master's degree in that. We also have a master's degree in wireless health, which is applied technology into healthcare and what we're going to be talking about. We also do genomics research, and then we run the world's first clinical trials program focused exclusively on digital health. We're headed by Dr. Eric Topol. Many of you may recognize his name. So we publish, there's a lot of work we've done in digital health. These are just some of the headlines of some of the articles that we've written and been published in the digital health space. So there's plenty out there, and there's certainly going to be plenty more. I think we're on trial number approximately 30, and we've only been operating digital health clinical trials for about 3 years. I apologize, I'm going to stay down here because the room's small. I think it's better if I'm closer to you, but I have to turn around and kind of see where I am since I don't have a monitor. I know there was just a session on the Precision Medicine Initiative. We're very, very involved. In fact, we hold the largest grant, which is interesting. We're a very small institute, but we have a $205 million grant out of PMI. And one of the areas that we're responsible for is the categorizing, creating the library, and testing of digital health devices. As part of the PMI initiative. The PMI initiative envisions having digital devices in the hands of the participants in the PMI to collect phenotype data, as well as biological data, because there are digital devices that do blood chemistries, analyze breath, and any number of other kinds of outputs. So you'll be seeing a lot from the PMI initiative, and a lot of it's going to be coming out of La Jolla, where we're coordinating not only the IRB, but the entire platform for communicating with all million participants, a mobile app, and a number of other elements of trying to recruit 350,000 independent volunteers to contribute their data to the PMI initiative. Another 650,000 volunteers will come out of the relationship they have with the health systems that are contracted with NIH to recruit into the PMI initiative. This is just a partial list of the sensors that are currently available and kind of what they create in terms of output that we currently work with. It's kind of our essentially reference library category titles. And what I often tell folks in the disease area is don't worry about what other sensors are out there. If you understand what data you'd like to collect, phenotype data, chemistry data, et cetera, there may already be a sensor array that's available to use, and or there may be an easy way to kind of reassemble one, because there's so many of them out there, and many of them can be repurposed. We have Band-Aids, for example, smart Band-Aids that have upwards of 12 different sensors on them that are as small as a 1-inch J&J Band-Aid, and that Band-Aid just measures 12 different things, and so there's no reason it can't be used in many, many, many different use cases. This is a fun little story that just came out about a couple of months ago. Patient presented in the emergency department with an arrhythmia, and the physicians wanted to consider doing a cardioversion. That's where they take the defibrillation pads and shock you while you're still conscious. You don't really want them to do that unless they really have to. because you're not unconscious when this happens. But they only do that if the arrhythmia is basically within 48 hours of being fresh, so to speak. So the question was, how long has it been going on? The way they figured it out, that's the Fitbit data. The patient was wearing a Fitbit. So they looked at the Fitbit data and said, it's only happened in the last 48 hours. Let's go ahead and shock them. So that's just kind of an interesting little episodic event that had just recently happened. You've all heard of the term, I'm sure, in the media of Internet of Things. Internet of Things is the notion of connecting things to the internet that either share data, collect data, or both. 50 billion items. You all know cell phones. There's over 7 billion cell phones in the world. That's 7 billion of the 50 billion. But now we're getting down to things like sprinklers, washing machines, and the list goes on and on and on, cars, etc. The world is moving into a networked society of items and devices that collect data. And interestingly enough, drugs are going to be part of that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about connected drugs or smart packaging around pharmaceuticals. So as you, I'm sure, are aware, the body itself is a source of tremendous amount of data. There's obviously a lot of press about the genome. There's even more data built around the biome. Then we add the physiological data, the chemistry data, and the list goes on and on and on. So really what digital health is about capturing, aggregating that data into useful platforms that can be used for diagnostic purposes, titration of a drug, therapy management purposes, and the list goes on and on and on. What's happening in this area is a tremendous amount of funding has been attracted into digital health. In the US alone, there's over 5,000 digital health startups. And of course, they attract a lot of money. The run rate for this year, $8 billion, is likely to pass the investments, the total biotech investment rate this year. So this is a hot area. It's been growing and growing. It's been basically doubling in investment every year. There's lots and lots of players. These are just some of the venture capital firms that are playing in the space. Some of the venture capital firms that have made multiple investments in digital health. Some of the names I'm sure you may recognize. More venture groups that have made multiple investments. Strategic investors, Fortune 500 companies, big foundations, and others that are interested that are making their own investments aggressively. Google is very active, Qualcomm is very active, many other firms. They have really kind of led the effort as they're making investments that match to strategic efforts. Qualcomm makes and designs chips, wireless chips for communications. They're very interested in the healthcare area, and I'll give you some further examples here in a minute. But every one of these is an organization that has a strategic interest as a reason why they would invest in the area. And we're starting to see the companies mature. We're starting to see some IPOs and some sales and some roll-ups. So this industry is just kind of starting to take on kind of a path of its own and move beyond the venture early stage form of the companies into much larger companies, and then these eventually roll up and be acquired and become part of very, very large companies. But we're seeing the very large companies also move into digital health. Last year, there was an analysis made of the Fortune 50. In terms of 2012, how many had a legitimate healthcare offering? And in 2015, how many had a legitimate healthcare offering? The number went from 14 to 38, and they were all in digital health. And those are just some of the brands that have a digital health offering in the marketplace. The one you hear a lot about is Google. You see Google moving into everything from diabetes to pharmaceuticals through Calico, and the list goes on and on and on. The way to think about Google is they're finding other data sources to feed search. You have to kind of connect the dots over time, but we will move in the medical world of search. We'll move from a search that you're all used to doing today, which is, tell me what the symptoms of flu are, and getting a response, and then sorting out and trying to figure out which answer actually made the most sense, to here are my symptoms, here are my labs, here are my physiological information, here, by the way, here's my genome, what do I have? That part scares the doctors, but it's actually well on its way. How many of you recognize Avery Dennison? They make labels in the office supply stores. They're in digital health. Those are smart Band-Aids. Those are peel and stick disposable devices that measure physiological data made by the label company. That's my whole point about everybody's kind of migrating into this space. And why? A lot of it's driven by the cost structure of healthcare. Everybody knows we have to figure out ways to drive that cost structure down. And as we move from the expense side, the high expense side of the hospital arena for taking care of people into less expensive facilities and ultimately into taking care of people at home. And there's a concept that you're going to start hearing more and more about. It's just now starting to bubble to the surface. I started talking about it about 4 years ago, and it's called admit to home. If you think about it, when you go into a hospital, you've hired the hospital effectively as your general contractor to feed you, bathe you, and hopefully get you better. Right? And then when they leave, they just pat you on your head and say, good luck, here's all the things you're supposed to do. Right? And half the time you're not even in any condition to pay much attention to those things. So what if that general contractor had responsibility for you at home and took care of all the things for you at home as well? I don't mean telling you, here's the home health agency we called for you. I mean taking care of everything just like they did in the hospital. Kind of surround you with the full set of elements. So you're starting to see payers and providers begin to collaborate and answer the question, if we did actually admit the patient to home, what do we have to do? How would we monitor that patient? How would we collect that data? How would we provide nursing services? How would we intervene on therapy changes? How would we intervene on titration changes of drugs and do that effectively? So you'll hear more and more about that concept. And around all these concepts, what's the most important device? The phone. It's not the only way of communicating, but it's one of the most key, and the reason why it's key is because everybody's got one and everybody's used to it as a platform. And of course, we're all addicted to it. But that's the premise of the phone and communications and the network effect that phones have had in terms of driving interconnectivity and networks. So that same principles are being applied in the healthcare space. So I'll only walk you through just some of the simple examples, and I'll give you a few stories. This was the story of a company that was the first one that made me understand the power of digital health. AliveCor makes an Ecg adapter for your phone. It is $69. For $69, you can turn your phone into a single lead ECG and find out whether you have AFib or a number of other arrhythmias. And you can have it analyzed by a technician or a cardiologist, and you can carry it with you at all times. Very, very inexpensive. FDA approved, been in the market now for a number of years. Why did this change my mind about healthcare? Because I gave one to my 15-year-old son when he was 15. He's 22 as of yesterday. I gave it to him when he was 15. It wasn't FDA approved, but I've got access to non-FDA approved stuff, and sometimes I can run my own little clinical trials in my family. So gave him one and said, if you feel like you feel funny, an arrhythmia, capture it. Maybe your electrophysiologist can make use of it. So at 1:30 in the morning, when he was at a cabin in Montana with my brother and sister-in-law, they called to say they were taking him to the hospital. He was experiencing tachycardia. I asked to talk to him. They were in the car, and they handed the phone to my son, Keenan. I said, Keenan, how you doing? He goes, I'm all right, Dad. I said, what's your heart rate? He said, 214. He said, and before I could say anything else, he said, but Dad, don't worry, I've got everything taken care of. I said, what do you mean? Now understand, when I gave him this device, I hadn't read the instructions. I didn't know very much about it whatsoever. He did, though. So he said, well, we called the hospital and got one of the ER nurses' email address. We've already emailed my ECG. We've emailed her my medical history, which we did have on his phone because it's a complex congenital heart condition. And we looked up on Google Maps, found out we're 35 minutes away, so I told him to have my adenosine IV ready when we arrive. He knew the therapy and demanded it. That's when I knew we could empower, with $69 device, we could empower consumers. And he figured all that out. No doctor told him that. His parents didn't tell him that. He figured all those elements out and made the demand on the healthcare system to serve him. The very next day, the chief of cardiology at USC and I called that ER doctor. He said, we're calling, and we almost got the word about out when he goes, I know what you're calling about. That never happens. I've been doing this for 35 years. No patient has ever given me all the symptoms, given me the evidence, their medical history, told me what the treatment was, and gave me the demand exactly when and where they would deliver the treatment. So I knew we were on to something here when that happened. At the same time, about 5 years ago, I created something called the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. Some of you may know about it. It's a $10 million prize for a device in the hands of a consumer that can make diagnosis without any external help. That prize will be judged, final judging in this coming January, and the top 3 winners will be awarded up to $10 million. The first prize is $7 million. So you're going to see a lot more. Why did Qualcomm, a company like Qualcomm, want to fund a tricorder prize? Because the reason is because Qualcomm envisions there'll be hundreds of tricorders, hundreds of small portable devices that'll diagnose, treatment, manage therapy, et cetera, et cetera. And this was a way of bringing the world's awareness up about what was possible. We had 134 team entries from around the world, down to the final 7 today. This is one of the teams. Although this was a product that they launched on Indiegogo, at the time the largest, most successful Indiegogo product launch in history. That is a form of a tricorder. It's a device you hold in your hand, little puck-like device. You hold it up to your temporal lobe, and in about 30 seconds, you can pick up heart rate, skin temperature, SpO2, respiratory rate, blood pressure, ECG, and stress for less than $199. Think about these kind of devices as an upgrade to mom's mercury thermometer in her medicine cabinet at home. Arming yourself with more information than you previously had before. Arming yourself with information you sometimes had to go to a medical facility and somebody had to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to even acquire this data. They even make a version you can pee on. That's your urinalysis component that's part of it. So we're gonna see more and more solutions that have blood chemistries, urinalysis chemistries, breath-based chemistries that are part of kind of consumer-oriented, home-based diagnostic kinds of devices. This is for home breast lump detection. This is FDA approved. Some of you will be surprised about this. This is non-radiographic. This is touch-based. This uses extremely sensitive pressure sensors in a device that's waterproof, that can be used at home, that's got a cell phone chip in it, that's cloud managed, used over the surface of the breast, maps the breast, and finds lumps. It's clinically validated at better than the practitioner, better than the patient, and better than mammography. Currently only sold to practitioners. There's no reason this could not be turned into for use in their offices. There's no reason why this ultimately couldn't go through the trials to become a consumer device, used at home, perhaps in the shower every day. This is a device out of Israel. That's another one of these tricorder devices. It does oscillation, so it does sound from the chest, sound from the heart. It looks in the ear. It can capture video down the throat, up the nose, into the ear, all to be shared. Obviously, an upgrade to mom's mercury thermometer. This area of digital health has become so popular, one of the most popular HBO shows has decided to feature it.
Would you be interested in a device that links to your smartphone and lets you know even before it happens whether you're having a panic attack or a heart attack?
Yeah.
Okay, here's how panic attack works. You wear this on your finger all day and it tracks your vitals. Or, if that's too embarrassing, there's also a Bluetooth suppository, and that goes right where you think it goes. And that comes with a retrieval kit.
Obviously a comedy. So this is leading to the Internet of Medical Things. And I just showed you a whole bunch of examples, but the notion of what you can connect in medicine is pretty much as unlimited as medicine itself is unlimited. And really the questions come down to, what are the clinical reasons for doing the connectivity? What are the business reasons for doing the connectivity? And what are the outcomes and patient benefits and convenience reasons for doing the connectivity? When you can get good answers around that kind of circle of questions, then you actually have a reason for a product to be developed. And so the industry that I work in, which is obviously digital medicine, is now kind of talking about the Internet of Medical Things as kind of a way of labeling much of the activity in this space. But interestingly enough, the Internet of Medical Things includes devices designed for consumers, as well as Class 3 medical devices, and kind of everything in between. So it's really a broad area. So here I'm just going to run through what's happening a little bit in the pharmaceutical industry, making what I refer to as smart packaging for pharmaceuticals. So anything that adds digital information or extracts digital information from either the drug or the patient taking the drug or from the device that's administering the drug is part of this kind of smart packaging arena. We've got lots and lots of folks doing this. Sometimes it's as simple as an app on a phone. Other times it's a connected injector, a drug delivery patch, a patch that's measuring multiple physiological signs that's used partly for titration of drugs. And you'll see plenty of examples. J&J is using an approach that is designed to work with practitioners so that you integrate consumer products and medical products ultimately on their platform. And you'll see them both address the consumer health world and the professional health world, and they will blur the lines between the two. Novartis has put together a $100 million investment fund with Qualcomm, a second fund. Qualcomm has its own $100 million fund, and then they did one together, and here's just some of the investments they've made. But Novartis has a number of projects of their own in the connected pharmaceutical space. Pfizer has really been working hard. I'm just kind of giving you kind of highlights of what different companies are doing, but really working hard on digital therapies that are phone-based. They're therapy management systems. We actually have one therapy that's been through FDA and has reimbursement by Blue Star, which is a diabetes management therapy, which actually the therapy on the phone, following what the phone tells you to do, actually outperforms metformin, the drug. So really, software as a drug actually exists. It's been through the FDA, it's been approved, and it actually has reimbursement attached to it. So you can actually prescribe software, get it paid for, and actually outperform a drug for certain groups of patients. Pretty interesting. Qualcomm's all over the place with implants, anything that needs connectivity. That's what Qualcomm's expertise is, so lots of companies come and knock on their door. In fact, so many companies came and knocked on their door that they now have a program for the pharmaceutical industry where they'll design the electronic component of a drug for free in return for a long-term royalty once the drug hits the market. They publicly announced in August at their annual user meeting they have 46 different drug products in development right now with different pharmaceutical companies. AstraZeneca, lots of projects, but heavy on the inhalers. So connected inhalers that pull information about when, where, how, and how much drugs being consumed. Lots of companies are working in this space. Teva bought a company called Gecko to do the same thing. And Amgen's really big on connected injectors. So these are drug delivery mechanisms that keep track of when, how, and how much is being titrated in as a drug. So it's a way of obviously managing the titration, collecting information. There's physiological sensors, activity sensors, et cetera, all built in. So there's a lot more information being able to be connected in these kinds of products. This is all leading to the concept of being integrated in a network. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So most products in the healthcare field have always been siloed. The products come out, it goes through the FDA, and it has a target market, and it kind of stands alone. It doesn't really interact with anything else. If you think about your cell phone world, everything interacts with everything else. You get network effect. In the communications world. So what we're starting to see is some examples of some medical device companies figuring out how to get network effect. And why do they want network effect? They create more value, and they lock their product in because it becomes part of a network. It becomes harder to take it out because it becomes a core element of the network. So here's one, a company called Yofi Meter. This is not yet available yet, but this is an all-in-one meter. What makes Yofi really unusual is it's got a cell phone chip inside of it, so it's connected to the network. You can reach in your pocket with one hand, test, and get the results in less than 10 seconds. No unpacking of a little kit of devices, no finding a place to put the kit down and get everything out you need. It's very, very quick, very, very fast, and you can build a set network of healthcare providers or family members to share data with. There's built-in coaching. There's built-in video, there's built-in video conferencing. This is all on the meter. Dexcom has built an open API system. It's still a controlled API. You have to be invited in. It's not completely open. But as a patient, you can now assemble your own glucose monitoring system. You can get an iPhone. You can get an Apple Watch. You can use the Dexcom G4 and now G5 system for monitoring continuous glucose. You can add a pump to it. You can download different versions of software, Tide Pool being one, as an example, and assemble your own solution. And these were never submitted to the FDA in all a package. You're actually building your own solution. It's a networked effect, and they all communicate with each other. This is a whole new world of interconnectivity where the patient is actually choosing the modalities by which they kind of monitor their condition. These are just more, Tandem happens to be one of the pumps you can use in the system. And of course the Dexcom continuous glucose monitor. And to show you how far it's going, this is one of the artificial pancreases projects at Boston University. What did they do to make the world's first artificial pancreas that seems to be working pretty damn well? Well, they took an iPhone, they took a Dexcom G4 continuous glucose monitor, and they took a Tandem pump, 3 off-the-shelf items, put some duct tape around it, and turned it into an artificial pancreas with some software. So we now have, in the United States, somewhere approaching 100 patients who have on-the-net, self-published software that have built their own artificial pancreas. This is not FDA approved, not from any large medical device company, but there's patients walking around in using this kind of solution right now, as the parents have figured out how to solve problems for the type 1 patients. This is a messy area, it's a dangerous area, but what's happened here is the parents have gotten out ahead of the companies in a very, very aggressive way. Propeller Health makes inhalers they were the first company to make connected inhalers. These inhalers pull data from NOAA weather, pollen count, wind, rain, all the elements that you would expect, UV, pollution levels, measure it up with when and how much dosing you took, and by location, map it together with Google Maps, and actually create pollution maps of places to go. So if you want to go for a run and you have a high propensity for, say, an asthmatic attack, it'll tell you where not to go. And even a large company like Philips has built an ultrasound unit that you cannot buy, you can only rent. It's $179 a month. Fits into your cell phone, you can carry it in your pocket. Uses Amazon Web Services so you can share the images to other physicians, back to the patient, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just all examples of kind of where things are going, and again, the common theme here is kind of phone is obviously centric to a lot of them. Here's Apple's play. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Health Kit and Research Kit, and then Care Kit for therapy management. These are tools to build upon for aggregating data from consumer devices, for doing research, or for designing and managing therapies. They're starting to interact to share information into the big electronic medical records. They will start sucking information out of those electronic medical records. They just bought Glimpse. For those of you who don't know what Glimpse is, Glimpse actually decodes electronic medical records, puts it into a common open API format. So Apple may be the first company to create portability of electronic medical records in a electronically shareable format that you can then share with another doctor, or to the app of your choice. Once Apple has tens of millions of people that have sucked down their electronic medical records, it'll be an app developer's world, because they'll go to the app developers and say, would you like to develop apps that you can market to consumers who may be willing to share their information up in order to get a benefit out of that app? Of course, Apple is going to collect their 30%. So what's driving a lot of this? Convenience. Yes, it's medical outcomes. Yes, it's cures. Yes, it's new revenue streams. Yes, it's new business opportunities. But a lot of the connectivity is being driven by convenience. And here's a few of the companies that are playing in that world. Just to give you one element of convenience is, how do you get information off of wearables that might be on your body and get it into the network? Well, you can use the phone as a hub or network, or you use other devices. And these are just some of the devices. Many of you may recognize Amazon Dash. Amazon Dash right now does not offer itself up as a hub for connecting to other devices. It is a hub for connecting to your voice and asking it to do transactions for you, but it's not a hub for other devices. However, the radios are in it. They just haven't turned it on. They're still training us to use our voice. So you can imagine Amazon-like hubs Google has one announced. Qualcomm has been in the market longer than anybody. That just automatically sit in the background, look around and go, what do I recognize? What signals do I have? I know I recognize that signal, let me grab it and send it up to the cloud where it's supposed to go. And then perhaps transact on it. So you're going to see a lot of infrastructure from that regard. And that'll then support a lot of another form of infrastructure, telemedicine. So we go to the doctor a lot to find out whether we need to go to the doctor. And so a lot of what I'm showing here is going to eliminate a lot of that going to the doctor to find out whether I need to go see the doctor. And what's in the way of making this scale faster? Payment and reimbursement. How do people make money? That's what'll be the grease that makes this happen. As more and more payers pay for telemedicine, more and more consumers will say, why the hell should I go to see the doctor when I can sit right here in my living room and see the doctor? And we're seeing very, very strong adoption of telemedicine, especially among millennials. No big surprise. The big Fortune 500 companies are the lead. They're taking the lead in payment. We've got quite a bit of reimbursement now available for telemedicine. The big payers are now starting to move aggressively in that direction. And so you're going to see more and more solutions that have telemedicine as part of it. And then wearables themselves, those that you've heard about a lot about, Jawbone, Fitbit, et cetera, are still a very rapidly growing market. Traditionally kind of looked at and thought about it from a consumer market, but they're the ones allowing things to be made cheaply and inexpensively, which has a direct impact on what happened in the medical community as well for the devices that are made that are more traditional medical devices, because you can leverage the volume that's coming out of the consumer devices. And we're starting to get brands and brand awareness, so we actually can have wearables that look good and are nice. And so you're going to see more and more of what we think of as traditional weapons start to look like things you would expect from your favorite brands in the jewelry or clothing space. And one of the areas that I spend a lot of time in, I happen to work with one of the world's largest companies that works in two areas, sports apparel and lingerie, tight-fitting clothing. And tight-fitting clothing happens to be the kind of clothing where you would mount sensors. And most of the world's smart apparel today is made by this company on behalf of different brands, and the kinds of sensors we're beginning to see demand for in clothing is the same that you would have on a smart Band-Aid or on a watch or some other form of wearable. The clothing itself just forms a place to kind of hold and position the sensor. And so there are use cases for clothing, there are use cases for Band-Aids, and there are use cases for things like watch-based solutions. And these are just some of the sensors. Most of the smart apparel right now is really targeting the athletic market and the fitness markets. But here's one of the first medical ones. That's a little booty for newborns that measures heart rate and SpO2. Goes to a cell phone in the hospital with a big nursery. A nurse on an iPad can watch all the kids' heart rate and SpO2s. And when they go home, they can just have mom download the app, and mom can take home the booty with her. So, and I now have a few hospitals looking at this as a clinical product, but more importantly as a marketing product. Come have your baby at our hospital because we give you something special to go home with. As a concept, you can kind of see where that goes. So, this is the big question of the day. What I just showed you raises the issue of, are docs going to be prescribing the apps, or are the apps going to be telling us which doctors? I'm serious about this, very serious. So in order to highlight that, I'm going to show you another reason why the medical profession is also part of this disruption process of digital. This, what I'm going to show you next, comes out of the out of USC Center for Body Computing and some of their work. I'm going to show you two different ways that they're virtualizing physicians.
Meet Bill. Bill has been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. His cardiologist, Dr. Saxon, has given Bill a number of treatment recommendations. After leaving the office, Bill decides that he would like to review safety and efficacy evidence for some of the treatment options. Dr. Saxon hooks him up with her own virtual doctor.
Hi, Bill. It's Dr. Saxon. Well, not the real me, but the virtual me. I know you had some additional questions about your diagnosis of atrial fibrillation.
Which treatments are you most interested in?
What outcomes are you most worried about?
The virtual doctor scours the evidence database for relevant studies.
For the outcome of mortality, We found 4 studies with over 47,000 patients who have a similar patient profile as you. The data shows there was less than 1% fewer deaths in the group that took the new oral anticoagulants compared to the group that took Coumadin, which means that the new oral anticoagulants reduced mortality by 9% compared to Coumadin. We would have to treat approximately 140 people over 2 years to save 1 life. My recommendation, based on this data, is that you switch from Coumadin to a new oral anticoagulant because you have a mortality benefit and a reduced risk of the major target of these drugs, that is stroke.
So David, this is the man that I've flown across the country to meet.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there anything that I can't ask him?
Why don't you ask him that?
Is there any question you can't answer?
I have no comment about rap music.
Neither do I.
That is not
It's
a real
amazing.
person.
It's almost haunting that he is looking directly into my eyes.
Yeah, it's new technology, and the person himself will come through, as you'll experience.
I quickly forget that I'm talking to a recording of Pincus, and I'm drawn into his stories about the family he lost and his twin sister with the golden hair.
Is there one thing that stays with you more than anything else about the Holocaust?
I mean, the thing that pains me more than anything else, I can't remember anything about my sister. Before the war, during the war, what she looked like. There's just one thing left. That's the braid.
Is a braid of her hair.
Pincus, do you have any regrets?
I regret my family, my surroundings, my life.
His ability to answer my questions is incredibly powerful, but it's only half the story.
So you see that technology? I can't show you what the Army has done with it. They have 12 hours of psychological therapy done completely virtual. The therapists are real people. They have been completely digitized. And so the patient interacts with the digital version of that therapist in a conversational way. What is it called? It doesn't have a market name yet. It's from a group called ICT at USC. So this area is moving very, very fast. Imagine that technology being used for diabetic educators, for genetic counselors. Imagine now, instead of picking your doctor, you pick a celebrity. Maybe it's a celebrity doctor. Maybe it's, I used to say Brad Pitt, but it's kind of been in trouble the last few days. But maybe it's Brad Pitt. Maybe it's Angelina. And you turn, because you can actually, you arm that image with the information, so you can turn anybody into an expert. So you can literally now democratize the access to a key opinion leader and let anybody have that interaction with that opinion leader with this technology. So this is still very early. I'm not saying this is around the corner, but this is where things potentially are starting to go as we start figuring out how to scale physicians so that everything doesn't have to be one-to-one. We can take the expertise that's baked into their heads after 10, 12, 15, 20 years of education and turn it into a digital resource. And of course, getting access to the data, I talked a little bit about what Apple's doing, is one of the key elements in making sure that the data is available and actually in people's hands. We know about the Blue Button initiative, but if you can't actually get anything when you say, I want my data, and if it's not available in digital format that's shareable, which is not what Epic makes available today. For those of you that have something like Follow My Health or My Chart, you don't have a shareable format, you have a read-only format on your mobile phone. You need it to be in a shareable format, or you can't share it with an app or easily share it with another healthcare provider in a way that they can suck it into their system in an easy way. We have to get data into a shareable format. And again, I think Apple is going to be potentially one of the first to kind of break the code on that. I don't think it's going to come from any of the big health medical record companies. The value of making that data shareable is huge. These are just some of the estimates that have been made out there. What happens if we all have our data in a shareable format in our hands? What does it do to the economy? What does it do to the healthcare system? It's got a huge potential impact if we just have access to that data. You can just see what McKinsey's effort here in terms of the annual value. So the question that I raise for all of you is, based on what you've seen, do you begin to see that we can empower consumers, that we can provide convenience, We can collect information that may impact outcomes, titration, therapy, management. And all of this will happen not because the current healthcare system says they want to make it happen. It's going to happen because consumers actually pull it through the system.
Miss Kelly, the doctor will see you now. Can you let the doctor know that I'll be with him shortly? Huh? I am getting a lot of work done. Your Wi-Fi is very fast. But he's ready for you now. I'll be with him as soon as I can.
Is she ready?
Not yet, but you're next.
Brave new world. Thank you very much for allowing me to share just a little bit of what I've been up to. And this, if you want more on this, this is really the textbook. Eric wrote this textbook. We did a number of collaborations, but easily available through Amazon. This really shows is the combination of genomics, consumerism, and digital health. It's a great book. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Don, for that overview of digital health and wearable devices. It is actually 2:45 now, but if everybody's okay staying just a few more minutes, we can maybe get one or two questions in. And hold on one moment.
I am a rare mom, and I'm also a clinical researcher, and I specialize in rare disorder clinical trials, and did that for a few years before my son was diagnosed, and actually he's still undiagnosed. One of the things that we struggle with in ultra-rare disorders is finding patients. So while all of these apps and tools actually help, they have the patient talking to physicians, what about the other way around? I mean, so many of the physicians that we encountered during our diagnostic struggle tell you things like, oh, whole genome sequencing is a waste of time. They don't know what to do with all of that data. This is from a respected physician at Rady's Children's. All kinds of things. Oh, don't worry, all of these symptoms are common for boys this age. So what about the reverse, where physicians actually use these tools when they have patients with rare things they can't solve instead of, right, it's my new business model? Am I going to start this today?
No, that actually is going to be the business model. It's a reflection on there's too much data. So the fact that the data is inputted in the computer and the physician hits some buttons and the answers pop back out, whether that happens for you on Google or it happens on the medical version of Google.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. But let me just tell you about a trial that we've got running right now at Scripps, because we kind of do things backwards and upside down. It's not a rare disease. It's actually the trial's on atrial fibrillation, but I think it's still relevant. What we did is we went to Aetna. And we said, out of all the patients you've got in the claims database, could you find these patients that aren't diagnosed with atrial fibrillation but have these characteristics? They came back to us with 300,000. We then said, would you actually send out a notice to them and said, would they like to be in a clinical trial? They did that. They marketed the clinical trial. The patients that wanted to be in it elected to come into the trial electronically, consented electronically, got their trial participation items, which included sensors and DNA devices for collecting samples by FedEx. And they got a little kit to take to their cardiologist. And the little kit to the cardiologist had very simple instructions. Your patient is involved in the following trial. You're invited to be in the trial too to help explain the results that the patient's getting. If you don't want to do that, Dr. Cardiologist, it's okay. We have another cardiologist that will do it for them. That has an amazing power in the message. Over 95% of the cardiologists agree to participate in the trial when the threat is they might lose the patient. So you can see we're controversial in our approach to trial design and into the marketplace. The patient, it's a virtual trial environment. There's no PI site per se. It's virtual. It's virtualized. The patient's actively involved. It's a crossover trial, so everybody gets to use the devices. They're either in the first batch or the second batch of patients. We do a full genome sequence on them, and what we're looking for is phenotype information and genotype information that might be diagnostic for purposes of AF. But I hope that example of how you might go about finding the patients would be a way that we might see in the future. We'll find alternative data sources, use other people to do the searching for us, and kind of engage the patient as if we were engaging a consumer.
Well, thank you again so much. I think we're out of time now.